Hi guys, and welcome to tonight's Music Tech webinar. We're looking at basics of synthesis again tonight, and we're just putting it all together. So it's going to be a bit of a tour over the last 4 weeks and kind of the parameters that we've been looking at, and just tidying up a few other kind of issues that go a little bit more complex into synthesis. But we're still going to try and keep it basic. We're still going to try and make it all about sound creation, so don't get frightened off by that. But we are going to look at some basic routing and kind of diagrams as well, so it should be fairly interesting. So once again, as per always, if you have any questions and you want to ask them, please feel free to. You can tweet us. We're going to solely do all the Q&A over at Music Tech 101 on Twitter, so please feel free to get in touch with us. It'd be great to hear from you guys, and we're going to crack on. So yeah, let us know what you think. So we're having a couple of technical issues. Hopefully all the sound's working. Yep, all looks good. 1, 2. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so here's the content. So we're going to have a look at the modules that we've covered in the last 4 weeks. Why learn synthesis? Now, a lot of people are kind of put off by synthesis because of sound creation, and they think, well, what's the point in that? So hopefully we're going to dispel some of those kind of pre-notions of what synthesis is. The next thing, we're going to look at just general sound creation, how to get the best out of your synths, what kind of things you can create with synths, and what you should be looking at to change them. Then we're going to do a little demonstration looking at presets and looking at saving your own presets, okay? And then finally to the Q&A. So, what we've covered in the last few weeks, we looked firstly at oscillators and amplifiers. So if you missed those episodes, please feel free to catch them on musictechstudent.co.uk. Then we looked at ADSR enveloping, how to shape the oscillator sound, okay? Then we looked at filters and kind of how filters work to manipulate the frequencies within the sound. So looking at high pass filters and low pass filters and how they kind of manipulate the sound to shape it even further. Then we looked at LFOs, which are ways of modulating that sound, adding movement to the sound, and basic routing. So we're going to take basic routing just a little bit further today and just show you a few kind of diagrams of kind of how these things are routed. Because what we've got to remember about synthesis is it all started with hardware modules. So it all started with big electronic boxes that were wired into each other. And from that always comes this idea of, okay, what gets patched into what? And this is what I think puts a lot of people off of synthesis, because it looks confusing. And to be fair, it really is. It does get really intense. But that's what sound creation is. And you know, the more you delve into this, the more fun it is. But you shouldn't be put off. So here's a basic, this is probably the most basic graph or diagram that I could find on synthesis. And it basically shows, and let me just bring my mouse into play here. So it basically shows the input, how the sound starts to when it gets to the speaker. So the first thing we're looking at here is the trigger. So we're pressing the note and it's sending off 2 waves. So it's sending off the actual note and the pitch off to the oscillator. And then it's sending off the note on and off to the ADSR. So we're sending off 2 signals at once. And this is all to do with the way it's routed. From there, whoops, my bad. From there, we're going to go into the filter section, and then we're going to go into the amp so we can control and manipulate that even further, and then it goes out. So a fairly basic synthesis, and it's going to sculpt it ever so slightly. So let's look at some of this terminology. So first thing is voltage controlled oscillator. What I've been referring to these last 4 weeks is just an oscillator. But the real terminology is voltage controlled, because it is electronic voltage that's being passed through fundamentally. And it's the same with a filter. So when you're doing your exam and you get these kind of questions, VCO, what does VCO mean? You know, it's just basically the official terminology for what an oscillator is. So a VCF, a voltage controlled filter, VCA, a voltage controlled amp. Then you've got your ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. Then you've got this trigger section. So the trigger in MIDI terminologies is just when you press the note and it just shoots out a signal and a MIDI message or some kind of electronic message just to say, hey, let's start the process. Okay. The next thing is this controlled voltage, this CV, and typically this controls the pitch of what's being sent out. So if you've got a keyboard, it already maps itself to a note, and that's what the CV is. And then finally the gate, and the gate is just telling it when the note starts and when the note ends. Okay. So here's a few more that just get slightly more complex. So this first one here, the same process, starts with an input, ends with a speaker, so keyboard input, then ends with a speaker. And you've got this change now where you can choose your oscillator. And remember, when we look at oscillators, you don't just have to have one. And actually a lot of these things, and when we get into next week, when we get into additive synthesis, you'll see all these sine waves being put together. Most subtractive synthesis generally have between 2 and 4 oscillators to shape and sculpt these sounds. Filters, amplifiers, and then we get the output. And in between that, we have this kind of routing. So once the note's been pressed, you have these global control dials, and you have these modulations that have been enhanced as well. And these are just basic routing. And if you're ever lucky enough to kind of get your hands on some proper modular synthesis and you can plug in all these things, you'll find that it's dead good fun just kind of patching all these areas in. So I mean, here you are. Here's I think this is the Moog modular version 2, I believe. Don't quote me on that, I may be wrong, but this is basically as hardcore as it gets. And even before that, you'd see each of these little units would be just separate boxes. They've been put into cases in this scenario, but basic individual boxes that get routed together to form these different sounds. Really interesting. Okay, so why learn synthesis? Basically, this is the start of electronic music. 1970s, end of 1960s, you had these people that were kind of experimenting with synthesis and sampling to that fact, and they were creating these really unique sounds. So you can think of it as kind of the beginning, and from that it's evolved into kind of electronic dance music, electronic hip hop, 70s synthesizer pop, and it's gotten massive. But when it started, it was kind of just looking at these organic sounds and all these kind of weird and wonderful things. I think that the official terminology, I'm not sure if they were the first, but musique concrète was one, and that was a French people, and the BBC were doing a similar thing called Radiophonics Workshop, and this was during the 1960s, I believe, where they were just experimenting with these sounds. And the Radiophonics Workshop, they were responsible for things like Doctor Who. And actually, the BBC have got a really good website at the minute where they demonstrate some of this stuff. So if you type in BBC Radiophonics, you'll get some really nice resources on that. So that's where it started, and it's important to know that this is where most of electronic pop and electronic dance music has come from. Okay. Other reasons you might want to learn synthesis: to be unique, to be cutting edge, because even now it's still quite cutting edge. You look at what some people are doing in the electronic dance industry with synthesis, and it blows my mind actually. So they are very much cutting edge, and they're using, and there's a new wave of electronic dance music happening right now, it's massively cutting edge. I mean, it all started probably a couple of years back with people like Skrillex, I suppose, just kind of coming up with these sampling loops and these really dirty bass kind of objects. So, being cutting edge is definitely a good thing. Because it's complex and difficult and people don't really know it, and people can't really learn it unless they put a lot of time into it. So it does take a lot of time to learn this stuff, but it can be really worth it. And for improving your understanding of what sound is. Okay, so subtractive synthesis, sound creation. Now, you can make lots and lots of different sounds. I've just listed a few here, and as we go through some of the presets in just a moment, we're going to try and kind of create a few of these things. So firstly, we've got this monophonic lead synth. Now the monophonic, you're going to get this in your exam quite a bit. Monophonic and polyphonic just means basically one note being played at a time, whereas polyphonic means multiple notes being played or can be played. Bass synths, pad synths, which is the same as polyphonic, but they're looking at these sustained sounds. This next one, organic timbres, is really interesting. I came across a synth maybe a year ago in Logic, and it's called Sculpture, and it comes up with these really nice organic timbres, and we're gonna have a little look at that in a moment. Modeling synthesis is really interesting, where you've got people out there like Line 6, where they're trying to recreate a lot of conventional instruments, say for instance electric guitar made by Fender, or the actual 1969 Stratocaster, and they actually model it to a T, or certain amplifiers where they model it to a T, or drum kits where all these sounds get modelled, and it's called modelling synthesis, and it's where they just try, using electronic forms, try and recreate the sound of an actual instrument. Effects and sound effects, percussive sounds is always a big one, and then electronic sounds, electronic drum sounds and things like that, and the list goes on really. Okay, so let's get on to the fun bit. We're going to do a demonstration. It's going to be just a broad view, and what I really want to kind of demonstrate tonight is that you can pull your resources from anywhere. You don't necessarily have to create every single sound. You can actually use presets, manipulate them, and save them as your own. So that's really where I'm coming at tonight. So just give me 2 seconds, and we'll go over to this demonstration page onto Logic Pro. And we'll just have a little look, and I've loaded up a few synths just to kind of give you an idea of this. So here we are. So this first one we're going to look at is the nice and easy monophonic synthesizer, and let me just play a couple of notes on this one, and we're just looking at bass synthesis on this one. Let me bring that down a couple of octaves. There you go. Okay, so let's tweak this sound. So straight away in this, every single synth that I know of, whether you're using Cubase, Logic, Ableton, comes with lots and lots and lots of presets. So this particular synth really likes its bass sounds, and you can see that from every single instrument being some kind of bass. So let's just have a look at some dub bass. Let's see if this is nice and dirty for dub. Okay, so I'm going to just go all left-handed on this now, see if I can play the keyboard and move the cutoff. Okay, and we can actually route these as well. And I think next week we're going to do some kind of showing you how to kind of control the parameters. I haven't loaded it up tonight, so I'm not going to try and do that now, but basically where you can actually use your keyboard, and if you're lucky enough to have one with the dials on it, where you can actually kind of just manipulate the cutoff and the resonance and all these kind of parameters. But you can see straight away that you're getting quite a lot of good bass sounds, and I haven't had to really create any of that. Okay, so there we go. There's my first example. Going through the presets, finding a nice bass sound. The next one, this is my favourite synth of all time. Let me see if I can load this one up. This is Massive, and if you are lucky enough to have a copy of Massive, you should be using it. It's a wavetable synthesis, and it can do pretty much anything you want it to. The waves here, unlike most where they just have four or five kind of oscillator waves, this one has lots more, where you can kind of, I don't know, just loads of different combinations. The instrument I've loaded up first is basically a piano, so I just want to model the fact of modelling synths. This is kind of some kind of dynamic stage piano, just using synthesis. How nice is that? Some kind of stage piano. But once again, this has loads and loads, and you've got the ones up here, and it's not the easiest thing to use from this preset catalog. But if you come over to the browser catalog, you can actually see that there is absolutely hundreds of different presets you can kind of pull from. Now this one that I've kind of got loaded up at the moment, if I can find it, it must be under patch 1. There it is. It's this one here. So that's the one I've got loaded up at the moment. But you can have anything. So let's try something else. Let's try, I don't know, some kind of other lead synth. So we've got a dirty lead here. What we got? Let's try this one. And that's got quite a long attack. So let's just go in there and change that. I'm not too keen on that attack. So where's my attack on this? Here's my envelope. Which one's being used? Is it number 1 being used? So let's just pull this envelope back. And hopefully that comes in a lot faster now. And how nice is that? And let's just see if any of these others are on. It doesn't look like these are on, because I still want to get that envelope down ever so slightly more, but never mind. It gives you the sense of what you can do here. Let's just do one more, because Massive is just such a powerhouse. So let's try for Massive Factories. Let's go. Let's see what their dirty basses are like as well. So they got sub bass, acid bass. And that's just straight out of the box. That's not me tweaking with any dials or anything. That's just straight out of the box. Just works. One more, just for good measure. So, if I didn't convince you before why you should be using Synthesis, hopefully Massive has kind of done the job there. It's just such a fantastic instrument. Let's just have a look at a few more then. Once again, this is my ES2 and I quite like this. So we've got a nice little pulse wave here. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like. That's kind of a polysynth. Oh no, this is a lead one, sorry. And I like that. This is a nice one where it just kind of wobbles off of the notes. If I hold down the C note and then press an octave C, you see it just jumping up to that note. And that's just down to this kind of glide parameter. And you can make that faster or slower. And that's quite nice. And once again, once we do this, we can chop and change any of these. So if you think, actually, I'd much prefer this to the acid pulse, what we can do now is actually save our presets. So we can come in here and we can go, okay, save as. Now, the original setting is this acid pulse, so we can call this whatever we want. So we'll just call it test 1, 2, 3, that'll do. And now, where it saves it conventionally, I think it's different in Logic 9, but in Logic 10 it goes music, audio, apps, plugin settings, and then it goes down to the actual plugin, and then you can just save it there just by pressing save. Now once you've saved it, it'll obviously call itself there, but now it's under its own category because you've just made that sound. So whenever I want to come back to my own ones, it's just there. And that's quite nice, because when you're getting in depth with synthesis and you want to make your own sounds, it's really important to kind of save out the ones that you've found, because it's so easy to kind of lose that with a single tweak of any of these dials, and then all of a sudden you're going, oh my god, what have I done? I've just lost everything. Okay, so I was talking to you about organic sounds before, and just saying I found this really fantastic synthesizer called Sculpture. Now here it is. Sculpture is just lovely for creating any kind of organic kind of sound. Let's just have a listen, see what you think. And I've gone for a drum skin here, but it can do so much more. So let's go to one of the presets, and let's go, one of my favourites, the mallets. So we're going to go down to something like a vibraphone or a marimba. Classic marimba sound. Let's go up a couple of octaves. Okay. Now, the good thing about this is you see this dial here, and you can actually change the texture of this particular instrument just by pulling this down. Now, if I play a note, and I look at the wide variety of different sounds that I'm getting. Now, all I'm doing is moving one dial around from corner to corner, and the difference in sound texture is massive. Let me just do that one more time. Okay, let's try the other corner. And it's just absolutely incredible. So this is a really nice synth. If you're trying to create those organic-y sounds, this is the one that's going to do it. And it's really, I know this seems like a bit of a basic tutorial, but actually you'll be surprised at how many of my students don't use the presets, or when they do use the presets, are too afraid to kind of change anything. So they're too afraid to kind of come in to the preset, dial it around, and they go, oh my god, I better get back, or I better not use that, I better make it myself, or whatever. So presets are not a bad thing. Someone has spent a lot of time making these presets, so it's only right that we'd use them. Nice long sustained sounds. Okay, so let's have a look at FM synthesis now. So we've got this really nice synthesis, and I really like just tweaking the harmonics on these ones. So let's go into one of our keyboardy sounds, and they're quite horrific, so please mind your ears on this next one. We can fine tune this. Let's try another one, something that's a little bit more horrific. So I guess the example here is just basically to have a little play, load something up and see if you can tweak it to make the sounds. And this comes in really useful for when you are trying to do recreations of songs, like we've had to do in task 1A, and like we've had to do in task 3A. The final synth of the evening is this lovely one. Now this is new to Logic 10, but it's basically the retro synth, and it's lovely actually, it's just brilliant. And it comes loaded with so many different kinds of sounds. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. Basically, my kind of demo of a few of these synths. And if you're not aware of where these synths are or how to kind of change any of them, you can just come down to here, press on this button here, and you get all of the massive amount of synths that are available. And this is pretty much the same for all kind of DAWs, Logic, Cubase, all the rest of them. And they all have these massive banks of synthesizers that just do different things. So hopefully that's given you kind of a round experience. Let's go back to the presentation just to finish off tonight. So just bear with me for 2 seconds while we just flip back over. So next week we're just going to round off this series of basics just by showing you different kinds of synthesis, or just introducing you. For the exams, you will need to have just a kind of basic understanding of what synthesis is and what the different kinds are. One thing you'll need for the A2 exam is most years they ask you to recreate some kind of sound. Not unlike the task 1A and task 3A coursework. So just be very aware of that they probably will ask you to kind of tweak a couple of parameters or kind of create a sound that replicates something else as well. So that's what we're going to do next week, just to kind of finish off this series of webinars. Different kinds of synthesis. Let's see if there are any questions. It looks like it was a quiet room tonight, so I don't think we've got anyone in tonight, but we'll have a little look and see if we've got any questions, but I think we're fairly quiet. No, I think we're on our own tonight, so not to worry. Once again, we'll finish it off next week. If you want to get in touch in the meantime, please feel free to. We're glad to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts on next term, I've already started researching sampling, and actually I'm pretty much sure that I'm going to go with the sampling for next term. So if you've got any thoughts on sampling or anything you think that I should be including, anything you think that you'd like to cover, please get in touch. We've only got 4 webinars next term, so we're just going to do 4 on sampling. But please get in touch if you want to be included in the show. If you want to get involved even more, you know, feel free to get in touch at musictechstudent.co.uk. Guys, you've been fantastic tonight, and I will see you next week.